The movie opens up with a car crash after a high-speed car chase, and a narrator saying that people do all sorts of crazy things, but if they're doing it for love, maybe it's not so crazy after all. Then the movie cuts into a few days earlier in Cologne, Germany. Our protagonist, Casey, is a former car thief in America, with his friend Matthias, both of whom are currently money runners for a drug dealer named Garen. One night, Casey spots Juliet, another American, and a bartender. He instantly falls in love and tries talking to her. Though interested in him, Juliet turns him down, stating that she wants nothing to do with someone who runs in Garen's circle, however he can look her up when he's out. Casey and Matthias goes to turn in their daily exchange to Garen. The latter is impressed by Casey's resilience and offer them a bigger and better paying job, but also riskier. While talking, Casey keeps staring at Juliet through the window. Casey, inspired by the little time he spent with Juliet, quits his job with Garen, then asks Juliet out. The two quickly begins dating, bonding, and move in together, while Casey takes up a job in the scrapyard. Next, Garen seeks an audience with his boss, Hagen. The latter is a philanthropist and a respectable businessman, but is secretly the biggest drug lord in all of Germany. Garen helped Hagen in the past to become a powerful man. However, Garen, not satisfied with his current status and wants more respect, so he requests that Hagen makes him an equal partner in the drug trafficking industry. Their conversation shifts into a disheartening phase when Hagen simply turns him down, and decides he doesn't want further ties to a mid-level wannabe gangster like Garen, and the latter is devastated. One evening, Casey and Juliet are playing in the snow and they both dare each other to see who could withstand the cold on a snowy floor whilst being naked. Suddenly, Juliet experiences seizures and is rushed to the hospital. In the hospital, she's told by a doctor that her kidney is failing, and despite having her under a stable condition temporarily, they're still going to have to perform a surgery for a transplant. But because she is not a citizen of Germany, she won't be qualified for the procedure. The grief-stricken Juliet breaks down and can only hope for a hemodialysis to keep her up and running for a while. With a procedure that costs almost 200 grand, Casey comes up with an idea to leave the junkyard site and go back to working for Garen so he can earn some serious illegal money, to go back to America and perform the surgery for Juliet. However, Juliet isn't keen on the proposal and rebukes the idea. Casey, not willing to lose the love of his life, even though his methods are highly questionable, he's hell-bent on helping her get a kidney transplant, so he takes Matthias and the duo goes back to Garen. Garen, who's happy to see them both, sees this as an opportunity to hit Hagen where it hurts. Hagen runs a legal logistics company and has tons of bodyguards. However, every 6 months he traffics drugs with a truck carrying cocaine from Rotterdam to Cologne packed inside golf balls. After extracting the drugs from the balls, he hands them to Garen who sells and distributes it. Garen gives back the takings in €500 notes for easy access. And finally the money is placed into the bodies of high-end luxury cars, which are then exported to Chile, completing the circle. Their task is to pull a heist on the truck carrying the golf balls. However, the driver is having a clean drug record, drives for 8 hours straight, and is always on time. To complicate the situation, the truck is monitored throughout the trip and with a GPS tracking system. However, if they're successful, Garen promises to pay them 250 grand each for their efforts. And to Casey, that's enough money for Juliet's surgery. Casey and Matthias discuss their attack strategy and their plan is underway. Before leaving, Casey leaves a note for Juliet implying that he's gone to do what she begs him not to do. On the day of the heist, Casey and Matthias recklessly pass by the truck carrying drugs. And after a few kilometers ahead of the truck driver, they crash their bike into their car, making it look like an accident. Casey takes cover in the woods whilst Matthias is in the driver's seat faking a death situation. Soon, the driver shows at the scene and is compelled to stop midway for the first time. After thinking for a while, he gets out of the truck then takes out a first aid kit to help the supposedly injured Matthias. However, this isn't a regular first aid kit as it contains a death machine. The driver shoots at the car, bringing Matthias back to life and he takes cover within the vehicle. Casey jumps him and a forced confrontation ensues. The duo were able to knock the driver out and hastily switch the GPS device to the car and Matthias drives off with it, whilst Casey takes a different path with the truck. However, a bearded man in the surveillance room sees blood dripping from Casey's lips and immediately confirms that their truck is being hijacked. The bearded man sends a team in and Casey's truck is broadsided by another large truck that flips his truck onto its side rendering him unconscious. Casey is captured and brought to meet with the drug lord Hagen in a large warehouse. The latter interrogates Casey and insisted that he didn't act alone. However, Casey remains resolute. Hagen sees Casey's bracelet with Juliet's name on it and reveals that Casey was calling her name while unconscious, so Hagen wants to abduct Juliet in order to motivate Casey into revealing the true masterminds behind the heist. As Hagen leaves, his men begins torturing Casey to soften him up. However, he is able to break free, hops into an empty car and luckily escapes from the warehouse. But he's being followed closely behind, leading to a car chase. Casey tries to warn Juliet and suggests they should get out of town, but she's upset over the letter he left and hangs up. Suddenly, one of Hagen's henchmen shows up and starts shooting at Casey's car. They drive into the city and are in a tight spot. All of a sudden, a speeding police car shows up, smashes into Hagen's henchman's car, launching it to the air. Casey, in the back seat, sees money sticking out of the passenger's door and recalls that that's how Hagen exports money back to Chile. Which explains why his henchmen are relentlessly trying to catch up with him. Concurrently, two of Hagen's men shows up at the hospital where Juliet is. Casey takes the money and wraps it with a bag, but the police shows up, compelling him to flee the scene. To avoid being detected, he poses as a homeless man in the street. He's able to evade the police, but the bearded man catches up with him. Casey steals another car from the street and absconds with the money in hand. En route, he calls Matthias and begs him to meet Juliet in her apartment to save her. Unsurprisingly, Casey gets a call from Hagen, who tells him he knows Juliet's address. However, Casey promises to give Hagen his money back if he leaves Juliet out of it, but the latter is unfazed. Desperate to get Juliet out of the apartment, Casey calls Garen and begs him to protect Juliet. In turn, he will give him the money he got from Hagen's car. But their call is interrupted by a shootout in the freeway that wrecks his vehicle. This is revealed to be the scene from the beginning of the film. Casey survives the wreckage, puts all the money in a small box and steals yet another car. With adrenaline pumping, Casey is desperate to save Juliet, so he calls Matthias, but the latter confesses that her apartment is empty and someone must have gotten to her before him. To complicate the situation, Casey's car runs out of gas, so he's forced to stop by the station. Inside, the owner doesn't accept large bills, but after extreme persuasion, the owner finally agrees. He's about to go out and refill, then he notices Hagen and his henchmen pull up to the station. They find Casey and the money, but before they could end him, a friend of the gas station's owner named Wolfgang sees Hagen's men with guns, so he grabs his shotgun and heads inside. However, the man is shot by Hagen, then his attention is drawn towards Casey. The latter reveals that he switched the trucks carrying the golf balls, and the truck they crashed earlier was a decoy. He urges Hagen to make a deal rather than killing him. But before Hagen could decide, Wolfgang gains consciousness and fires at one of the henchmen, causing a gunfight. So Casey uses the chaos as a distraction to flee with the money case whilst stealing yet another car belonging to Hagen. On the way, Casey calls Garen and asks about Juliet. Fortunately, Garen tells Casey that his men have her in the racetrack. Casey drives straight to the racetrack only to find out that it wasn't Juliet because Garen got the apartment number mixed up. Concurrently, one of Hagen's henchmen sees Casey and informs Hagen of Garen's involvement in the heist. The henchman shows up and shoots at Garen, then knocks Casey out to torture him. He ties up Casey, but Casey escapes and impales the man with a large hook. Casey receives a call from Hagen, who tells Casey that he has Juliet and is willing to trade her for the truck containing the golf balls. So Casey takes the money, steals Garen's car and zooms off to meet Hagen. Garen, who seemingly survived the ordeal, tracks his car with Casey and follows closely behind. Casey arrives at the location to meet Hagen, and is excited to see Juliet. Hagen commends Casey for his love and resilience towards Juliet. But before they could discuss further, Garen located the bar with the help of the GPS tracker and burst in, pointing a gun at Hagen. Unbeknownst to them, Casey had already called the police to that location. The police launched tear gas into the bar, forcing Garen to exchange fire with them, and is killed in the process. Casey and Juliet escape out the back of the bar with the money, while Hagen also escapes to a getaway car. However, Casey and Juliet are being pursued by Hagen's bearded henchmen. Casey gives Juliet the money and promises to reunite with her when it's all over. She gets into a train as the bearded man fires at Casey, but he's being gunned down by the police, and they arrest Casey. Next, Casey is interrogated by the police. He made a deal with the detective to expose Hagen's secret drug trafficking business in exchange for his freedom, and soon, Hagen is arrested. Casey mails a large amount of money to Matthias as his cut for his involvement. Then the next scene shows the emotional Casey and Juliet going for her surgery in the hospital as the movie ends. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like button and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos like this. Thanks for watching.